Welcome back to r/JustNoHOA. In this video, an HOA president confronted me after I pressure washed the house of a veteran for free. This HOA dude wanted to kick me out of the neighborhood. Let's dive right into the video. And the title story starts like this. You know the phrase, no good deed goes unpunished. Well, this good deed came with punishment, just not towards the person doing the good deed. So I live in an HOA neighborhood, and as much as I hate it, I do try and make the best of things. This story is more about my neighbor though, who is called Ben. Ben is in his 70s and a retired veteran. He's a really nice guy once you get to know him, because on the outside he might seem like a grumpy old guy, but we talk about sports a lot though. He kind of hit that age where taking care of everything himself became a little bit impossible. So his house really was dirty and in need of a cleaning. I don't mean so much inside, but the physical house itself outside was dirty, so enter the only other main character of this post. The HOA president, who I'm gonna call Goober, and if you don't know what a goober is, it's basically a word for a foolish person I always thought would make for a funny name. Anyway, this Goober guy is just constantly tripping on his power and loves his rules more than anything. He has an idea of a perfect community, and I hate to break it to him, but there's about 100 movies showing why that is a bad idea. I also guess that Goober thinks that the list he posted online of preferred contractors would mean that nobody is getting work done unless it is one of them, even though legally we have the right to hire anybody we want. The HOA cannot control something like that, obviously. I happen to own a pressure washer, which for me feels like I've made it in life. I always felt like if you're over 40, you either need a smoker or a pressure washer. It is not quite as powerful as those professional ones, but the times I've used it, it seems to work just as well as those. I also knew that the HOA sent out fines for things like a dirty house, so I was worried about my neighbor. I knew he was on a fixed income and did not need extra expenses like fines, and I also knew he just did not have the money to hire somebody to take care of it. So I offered to give his house a quick wash for free. I basically guaranteed that it might not be as perfect as a professional, but it would be enough to clean it and avoid a fine. Ben is always reluctant to let people help him, so it took some convincing before he finally agreed to let me do it, the condition being that he wanted to host a Super Bowl at his place instead of coming over to mine. I guess in his mind it would just even things out, and he has a nice setup, so it works out great. I waited for my day of work, get the pressure washer, and just start doing my thing. I think using the pressure washer is also pretty fun, like I'm a little kid with one of those giant super soakers, but actually a grown man. And yes, my wife has just accepted that I'm like this at this point in my life and never gonna fully grown up. I did not even fully finish washing his house before Goober just showed up out of nowhere. He was trying to get in the way, so I had to turn the pressure washer off and stop everything to find out what he wanted. Right away, he just started demanding for me to show him my permits for cleaning. I tried to just speak to him like we were reasonable adults, but that clearly was not gonna work out with him because it just seemed to go in one ear and out the other. I explained that I was just helping out Ben and that helping veterans was important to me and all of that. At the beginning, Goober apparently did not recognize who I was because he kept insisting that I should just shut the F up and get out of the neighborhood voluntarily, otherwise he would kick me the F out. He was being super aggressive. He then added that he does not give a damn about veterans either, because they are supposedly, according to him, lazy leeches and are stealing taxpayer money. Goober just kept demanding that I show him my permit allowing me to do this kind of work. Permits that don't exist, at least where I live, a fact I told him, but he just dismissed me by telling me that I did not know a damn thing I was talking about, and he then told me that I was not qualified to do this kind of work. Then he tried to put on some crappy nice guy act that I felt was worse than if he just stayed being a jerk. He basically said that he would not get me in any trouble for the work I'd already done if Ben went to the HOA website and hired a professional instead. And these ones he wanted Ben to use were all extremely expensive and out of his budget. At this point though, Ben had already come out to see what was going on in his yard. He still had that grumpy old man look to him, but was polite enough trying to tell Goober that not everybody can afford that type of thing. The only reason he was having me do it anyway was so he would not get stuck with an HOA fine for his house being dirty. Telling Goober that it shouldn't matter how the house got cleaned as long as it was clean, since that was the rule. The HOA president Goober still demanded that I stop, but I told him that I was finishing the job and that he should step out of the way because he could get hurt if caught in what I was doing. Then I finished washing the house and Goober had walked off. Ben told me not to think that this was over because he knew the look in a man's eye that he had before leaving. Ben was totally right because a slew of harassment came towards both of us because of the entire situation. I started getting bogus fines in the mail for things that were not even issues, claiming that I had trash all over my property when I actually didn't, also claiming that I was making a ton of noise at night. Just a bunch of things that I couldn't exactly prove he was lying about. I spoke to Ben about it and found that he was getting the same things in the mail too. Goober really is a fool though, because he made a habit of also showing up randomly just to talk crap to our faces. He was telling Ben that he was not a real veteran and that he just joined the army so he could be lazy after barely doing any work. For me, he was berating me for being a bit of a short guy and going so far as to start insulting how my wife looked. Trust me when I say it took everything not to punch him for those comments. But I'm sure me assaulting him was what he actually wanted. Neighbors saw and heard all of this too, so we had witnesses to the harassment. I was getting a bit annoyed by this, but some of the things he was saying were really getting to Ben. Talk about him just being a government machine and that he probably killed a ton of innocent people while he was overseas. Just stuff to really mess with his head. All of this was part of some big plan to turn other people against us so he could have some on-paper complaints so he could act against us more as the president. The thing is that nobody agreed with what he was saying or doing. He was only winning and making himself look horrible, and he was too much of a fool to even see it. We started to document everything he was saying to us, along with the fines that he kept sending that we were not paying because they were not fair. We even got a few neighbors to give written statements about what they had seen, and they were happy to help since I guess Ben and I are pretty well liked around here. I hired an HOA lawyer and explained to him everything that was going on and why. The lawyer drew up papers showing that Goober was causing emotional distress against Ben as well as violating something called his fiduciary duty. Which means as the HOA president, he's supposed to look out for people's best interest and was doing the exact opposite of that. Instead of jumping into a long and possibly expensive lawsuit, we sent Goober a demand letter. The biggest thing was for him to stop with the harassment and to waive all the fines based on the fact that they were made up by him. Second is that we were asking for money to be sent to Ben due to the emotional distress caused by all of this. If he gave into these demands, he would have gotten off easy, but of course he didn't because, well, he's just a damn goober. Our lawyer filed a lawsuit both against the HOA and against him personally, the HOA because of the fines and Goober because of the harassment. The rest of the HOA seemed either unaware of what he was doing or just scared about being sued because the rest of the board voted and outweighed him about the fines. They agreed to drop all of the fines. They were also willing to give a formal and even public apology at the next HOA meeting to Ben and me for the trouble. We were willing to settle with them, since our main problem was with Goober anyway. At first he did not want to settle and felt like he had done nothing wrong. When my lawyer sent his lawyer all the evidence we had against him though, that changed. I guess he explained to Goober in small words that he could understand that he would get buried if this went to court. He messed with a veteran and tried to abuse his power. From him, the lawyers reached an agreement on the settlement, the first thing being that Goober pays for our legal fees since it was his fault we ended up needing one. The second was that he would pay both of us for emotional damage that he caused with his public harassment and the comments that he made. Finally, we were demanding that he step down from his position as he had abused that power. I could tell when we were all meeting to sign on the agreement that Goober was furious about it. The HOA was doing better without him, and they made a few announcements. The first being an apology to both Ben and I about the experiences we had, and the second being that they were gonna update the website that showed recommended contractors. They did not want to get rid of it, but they wanted to make it clearer that those were only suggestions and people could do work themselves or hire anybody they wanted. That change might have just been for them to cover their own ass, but I just had a bad taste of the HOA because of Goober still. Ben was doing better now, and some of that money went into him hosting one of the best Super Bowl parties I ever went to. And yeah guys, I'm curious, if you ever found your dream home for a great price but it is inside an HOA neighborhood, would you bite the bullet and still buy the house? Or would you avoid it because of the HOA factor? Let me know in the comments, I'm really curious. And the next one is a super interesting story titled, "A single person now owns more than 50% of my building's condo units. They dissolved the condo board and installed it themselves. Now she is telling us at the end of the month that we don't have our parking spots anymore. Is this legal?" So I bought my condo brand new in 2014. It was a small building, around 32 units on 4 floors. It is in a real nice location and I paid a fair amount for my unit. When I first moved in, we had a condo management company who did a fine job. Unfortunately, late last year we discovered at the board meeting that someone had now owned over 50% of the condos. This person is someone who on several occasions had tried to pressure me into selling my condo to her. She was offering less than what I paid and I would not be able to find an equivalent condo in the same area for the amount that she was offering. This person basically voted by herself to dissolve the condo board and elected herself as the sole person in charge of everything. So then today I received a letter from our new condo overlord which states, by March 1st our parking spots are no longer gonna be available. If we want to keep our spots we must pay $175 a month. Failure to do so will result in our cars being towed. I have paperwork from when I bought my condo. Parking spot 3C was included in my purchase, but when I pointed this out to her about this I was told to more or less go F myself, and if my car is there on March 1st it will be towed. I basically have a single day to figure out what to do. Since this comes into effect tomorrow, do I try to go find legal advice right now? Relevant comments. Number 1. You definitely need a lawyer. The condo board must comprise of at least 3 owners and must act in the best interest of all owners. And by the way, Ripestars, I forgot to mention this story was from r/legal advice. So there are provisions in the Condo Act to force a board to do things or not do things. In one case, the board was ordered to personally pay legal costs and the costs of restoring a parking lot to its original condition. Then OP responded, I'm going to meet one tomorrow for a consulting. I managed to get 2 other owners to go on board with us fighting it. However, I did find out that the board does actually have 3 owners. One of them is apparently her husband and the other one is someone who is related to her. Neither she or her husband actually live in the building, and OP then further said, I'm probably going to move because everything is going to crap here. She has done almost no maintenance and the person who was responsible for cleaning the general use areas was let go. We've had 2 of the 6 washing machines have been broken since Christmas. If my car is towed tomorrow, what legal recourse do I have? Because according to what's written down in my ownership papers, I own that parking spot. Edit, I've managed to get 3 other people in our building together to see a lawyer tomorrow. Update again, I wanted to thank everyone for the advice. Me and several other tenants got on a board with a lawyer who promptly wrote her a rather verbal letter which kindly and suggestively told her to go pound sand. Since that letter, she has completely stopped and retracted all her statements about parking no longer being ours. On top of this, one of the other tenants apparently tipped off a Toronto newspaper. I have not seen an article, however. In response to this, it seems like she has completely changed her mind and policy on maintaining the building. So now we have someone who actually seems to come every day to properly perform cleaning and maintenance. Sadly, regardless of all these changes, I'm planning on getting out ASAP because, unfortunately, I feel after a few months she will probably change her mind and opinion on everything again. Also, I forgot to mention, on the night she threatened to have people's cars towed, both me and another person recorded the tow truck driver trying to set up a tow for my neighbor's car. After confronting the tow truck driver about how he was illegally trying to tow someone's car, he immediately took off. And yeah, we passed that along to the lawyer. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. The story starts like this. My grandparents had bought a very large property without much idea of what to do with it. They did not want to farm on it, but felt like it would be a waste to just let it sit there. So that was when roughly 100 years ago they dedicated a good chunk of the land into making an orchard. The first few trees grew and many more after were getting planted every year. At this point they covered almost all the spare land that was not being used. Even better, there was a little building near the back edge of the property that they would make jams out of the fruit and sometimes even store things. There was not a fence in the back, and in fact they became really good friends with the neighbor who lived on that property. The building had actually been built in a way that it was technically on both sides of the property, and the neighbor's late father had used it for carpentry. He did not mind it becoming my grandparents and used for preserving fruit. They had always thanked him with free jam, and that was a tradition that continued once both my parents and neighbor's children took over the property. Jump to modern day and I am keeping up the tradition of the family by working on the orchard, and I love it. My parents are getting a little older and we are at the point that we sometimes get people to come help during harvest season so we can get to do everything. The son of old neighbor died and his property had went up for sale. My parents thought about buying it and expanding, but the more we thought about it, the less it made sense. My brother lived in the city and we could barely handle the number of trees we have now. Enter the main antagonist of this story, evil neighbor Karen. Right away we knew that we were going to have problems with her. Everything was a complaint, from how early some neighbors got up and tended up their chickens, to how she complained she could not build a pool on the property. There were some local rules about it and the fact that the ground could not handle it or something. I never really looked into why pools are not allowed to be built here. Finally, her cycle of complaining came to us and our orchard. She complained so many times about our trees and how disruptive to her property they were. You're reading that right, the trees that do nothing but sit there and grow wonderful fruit are somehow disruptive to her. The main complaint is that the leaves will eventually fall off and get into her property. So she is actually complaining about something that has not even happened yet. Side notes that when it does happen, I make sure to rake all the leaves no matter which side of the property they seem to blow on. Finally, she is mad about the building that is on the border of the two properties and wants it removed. The thing is that since it is over a certain age, you cannot actually remove a building like that without a permit from the town. We were not about to let her bully her way into destroying something ancient. I understand that it was slightly on her property, but the way she was carrying on about everything got her on my bad side. That was when things started to mysteriously happen and could not just be coincidence. The trees that were closest to that property edge seemed to suddenly get sick and started to die. I found some weird holes near the bottom of the tree that looked like it was made with a drill. I could only guess that she was drilling something into the tree that would cause it to die. I had no proof of that though and could not get her. Also, some jam went missing and I had to put a lock on the building's door to stop what I really think was her from stealing. Finally, one day we left our property for a week to not only go on vacation, but to also attend a market in another city to sell our jam and some produce. When we came back, the building and the orchard were gone and everything we had there was destroyed. So yes guys, you heard that right, she really destroyed our beautiful, almost 100-year-old orchard. In its place was concrete and the frame for a structure. After a few more days, we found that she had built herself a garage right where that beautiful building used to be. My family was angry, not because of the material things lost, but because the whole orchard is like a family memory and she just tore it down. I wanted to get some major revenge and I knew that I was going to get it. She got away with destroying trees and stealing jam, but there was no way she was going to find a way to not get in trouble for this. I started doing my research, which is when I found out about the law regarding destroying old buildings, and went into town to see if she had gotten permission. It turns out that the town had no idea she had done this and the building was in the records as needing a very specific permit. That thing was not easy to get and required an inspection that said it was a hazard and had to come down. I let them know that it was torn down and a new garage was built right on the remains. Let's just say that Karen was in for a huge surprise when the town started going after her with all kinds of fines. She never even got a permission to build a garage either, so she was hit with one for that as well. At this point she had over $200,000 worth of fines for destroying the building and having a garage put up without getting any type of permit. My town takes both of those things very seriously and things did not stop there for her. I had put up cameras and caught her messing with my trees, which added another fine for destruction of private property. If that was not enough, there is one last piece of revenge that is the cherry on top. The land shows that her garage is built on what she thought was the property line. The thing is, it is about 75% on our land, and since it is old, it follows much different rules. We have the majority and are the only ones that need to file for a permit to have it destroyed. So, not only did she have to pay all of those fines, but at the end of the day, she lost whatever money it cost her to build that garage. We did not feel bad in the slightest, and she decided that she was going to walk in and start to mess with a family that has owned this land for almost 100 years. That will teach Karen not everything bends to her will, and she is not above the law. And before we end the video, we will read one last story from r/Petty Revenge that you don't want to miss. It is brand new. It's titled, "You want to make me do your work for you? Well, now you cannot take your break." So I got a coworker who is incredibly lazy. She's never been a hard worker, but within the last year, it's gotten bad. She could technically retire, but chooses not to, for whatever reason, which I wouldn't mind if you actually did your job, but not only will she never help the office, she does not even get her own damn work done. As you can probably tell, this woman annoys the hell out of me for a multitude of reasons. We have a system in our office where all customer questions go into the same queue. If it is an email, a voicemail, part of an online chat conversation with an employee in another department, it all goes into this queue. For whatever reason, anytime my coworker encounters a question that will take more than about 10 seconds to answer, she assigns it to me, which, yes, I'm very knowledgeable about our department. However, this woman has worked here 3 times as long as I have and should know these things herself. Well, today though, she assigns me a question, and as soon as I read it, I have no idea why she assigned it to me, because she should have assigned it to my boss and/or talked to my boss about it. As mentioned, I assign it to my boss and then go and tell her about it. During the beginning of our conversation, I overhear said coworker on the phone ordering food for lunch. Usually she hangs up the phone, waits about 5 minutes, and then heads over to pick up the food. Well, I'm still in my boss's office talking about this question. I should probably mention that my manager loves to talk, and while I'm usually trying to slowly back out of her office to end the conversation, this time I take a seat and proceed to actively engage. So the minutes are ticking by and my coworker can take her break because someone always needs to be office, and obviously I'm unavailable. At one point I kind of tilt the chair so I can see her out of the corner of my eye, and I can tell she's just itching to run out of here, but she cannot leave. What should have been at most a 5-minute conversation turns into a 20-minute conversation, and then I added a little more revenge because as soon as I left my manager's office, I ran out of our office to use the restroom just to delay her break even further. I cannot tell you how satisfied I feel right now. And yeah guys, thank you for watching. I will see you again tomorrow.